Natasha. And we had definitely an interesting incident in 2000, in late 2006, I want to say.
Now this was in the fall?
Correct, in the month of October, certainly. We think probably in the 20s of October, before Halloween, definitely. And that plays in the story a tiny bit, but we were driving home from Bangor, which is north of where we live, and late at night, after 9 p.m. definitely, we had just caught the late movie in Bangor, and we're heading home, and we're talking in the car, heading towards the town of Ellsworth, Maine, in an area that we refer to, and I don't know if it's officially referred to as Ellsworth Falls. It's more of a less residential area, although still, houses, but more wooded, coming into the town proper. When we encountered an interesting sight, we basically were coming up towards a street light, and in between the street light and us, we saw a figure on the edge of the road. I don't know which one of us noticed it first, but it was almost a simultaneous, probably, thing where we noticed it, similar to when a deer would be on the side of the road, and you may catch a first glimpse of that. Except this figure then moved to the center of the road, and at that point it was backlit by a street light, and it was standing, 2 legs definitely, and then proceeded to...
I got to interrupt you for just 1 second
Sure.
here. I don't want to spoil the suspense. What did you guys initially think it was when this thing walked out into the road, in the middle of the road?
I personally thought, as we were approaching, that there was a deer on the side of the road. I was sitting in the passenger side, my husband was driving, and as we're going down the road, they were on the left-hand side. And so looking out, you're always scanning so that way you don't hit a deer on your way home in this area, and that's always been my job. And I thought it was a deer on the side of the road, and we kept watching it, and at that point it was, as we're approaching, it's moving into the center of the road at the same time. So the two things are happening at once. And it was in an area that was pretty dark, and there's a street light 50 feet behind it, maybe 30 feet behind it.
50.
So it was one of the kind of sherbet orangey colored street lights, that was backlighting it, and still trying to figure it out. It kind of looked like a human walking out into the road, but super tall and really thin and lean, and your brain is still trying to figure out, well, if it's human, why is it moving so weird?
Right.
So maybe it's not human. Is it what is it?
In my initial, what I remember of that section of it was that my initial reaction is that it was a human on the side of the road, and moving into the center of the road, still possibly a human. I didn't really think about the deer factor so much, but it was the movements after that that really made my brain click into something's going on here. And my initial thought was, this is somebody playing a practical joke. And the movements that ensued after that are what made me think that it was not a practical joke, because it went into a position where it hunched, and it looked back in the direction that it had come from first, briefly, and then bounded forward. And
we watched it bend over onto the backs of its knuckles and put that down on the ground. And Tyler says he bounded across the road. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the way that it ran across the road or bounded across the road was literally was on all fours. And you wouldn't see a human bend over and run on all fours, but even before it bent over to get down on all fours, when it was standing up, the reason why it wasn't really clicking and making a lot of sense to be human is because the arms were so much longer than what you or I, standing in backlit, where our arms or fingertips would reach on our thighs. Its arms were so much longer wasn't computing. So then to watch it bend over onto its knuckles
Right.
and run across the road, but
Now, is it Natasha?
mhm.
You said you've studied marine biology, so you've had some anatomy classes and stuff, I guess?
Yeah, I have a degree in marine biology as well as in secondary science education, so I've taken a plethora of science classes.
So we could kind of refer to you as, an expert in looking at critters, I would think. I mean, you've probably had anatomy classes and looked at a lot of skeletons and
Yeah, all sorts.
what you guys are reporting, as you probably know, having those really long arms is pretty consistent. Although going from a bipedal to a quadrupedal stance is very interesting to me because that's kind of rare, but I have heard people report that. Now, you're pretty sure that I talked to, I guess, Tyler, I think you told me you said you weren't sure whether it was using its knuckles or whether it was going flat, but now, Natasha, you're telling me you're pretty sure it was on knuckles, huh? Knuckle running?
Well, and if you want to call it knuckles, but I know that when I saw it standing, I'm not sure how far you can see my hands with the camera, but standing, you could see its side profile with its hands go down like this and then go down on top of them. So that's why I'm so positive. I don't know if it was running like this or, you know what I mean? I don't know what it did, but you definitely saw it bend its fingertips like that and at the same time getting down.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd agree with her. I couldn't tell, the position of the hands, and also I think it was moving into her field of view more than mine. I mean, fractionally, but basically, I was concentrating on driving. She wasn't, and so, and I was slowing down with my brake foot simultaneously, so I couldn't compute it as well as she could. But I would definitely agree with the fact that it went down and bounded. It was definitely using more than just its legs. You can just tell.
And it was so seamless. It was like it was fluid. It was like it was supposed to be moving that way. Whereas if you or I get down on all fours and try to run, we're going to look like some disjointed mess.
Right.
So,
All right, so you guys are driving down through town. There's a street light up ahead. If I understand that where you guys are at, it's kind of in the fringe of getting into Ellsworth. And for the people listening that aren't familiar with Maine, that borders a really huge chunk of forest down east of the Machias Lake system. So there's a lot of woods down there, a lot of bears and moose, right?
Yeah, definitely. We live even further down the coast where the bears aren't prevalent, but they're more so, I guess you'd say.
All right, so the two of you guys are driving along. You see that what you think is a person about 7 foot tall, and I had talked to your husband the other day, so that people don't know I was privy to this, but his description of that creature being lanky and thin matches yours almost exactly. Now, I understand something really bizarre, even more bizarre, happened at this point, right?
Right. So I'll pick up from there. Basically, when the bounding occurred, when the whatever it was bounded away, we were coming closer, and that's when I felt I got a better view of what happened next. About 3 or 4 bounds to get from the center of the road to out of view, but right on the tail of the first was a second, smaller, identical, whatever you want to call it, Bigfoot or whatever you want to call it. But it was we were at the distance where, say, that first one had just come into view and come out of view. I could have somehow rationalized discounting it, but seeing a second identical, smaller, what looked to me like young or juvenile or baby one come on its heels and then follow it was crazy. I mean, that was to us that's what really cemented it in my mind was because I personally could see that portion of the incident much better because I'd had a second to kind of focus in my eyes. And it came into view running entirely, bounding, the entire time. It never was on two that I could see. It basically looked like it came into, the larger one came into the road and almost looked back to motion or to check whether the other one was coming behind it. And when we got close enough, it just powered away. And that startling movement, I think, called the other one to follow. And sense. It was weird because what I had pictured, or not what I had pictured, but what we saw was very similar to when you see a mother deer go into the road and then the baby, following behind it. And it was almost like you get that look like, oh, isn't that kind of cute? There's the baby.
I kind of have something different about that. I have a 1.5-year-old. So going through motherhood, let's say, to me, what the body language was between the taller one and the smaller one was almost a look up or, body language of annoyance. Like turning around like, come on, could you come? Like there's a car coming, let's pass out. And then the smaller one coming and following after the larger one. Really thinking about it and trying to rack my brain if I actually thought it was a mother and baby relationship, I'm still not sure, because standing sideward profile, it's not like we were able to notice any teats or breasts. I mean, not really sure what you would refer to them as. Still having a hard time putting together, do you refer to it as an animal or as a human? Or, you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to decide what vocabulary to use.
I think what she's saying is basically we had no way to tell any gender or anything like that. So, but that's what I just said that because that's the way that it appeared to us. It was that, it was like a bigger one and a smaller one, and it was like, come on, let's cross the road. And, it was very matter of fact in everything except for what it was. That was the weirdest part. So.
I see this as being fairly common. Like one of you guys said earlier, you're trying to fit this into this thing you're seeing into a context that is something that you've taught supposed to exist. A lot of people go back and forth about how much it looks like a human.
Well, but with those really obvious characteristics, they're so different because the arms are just way too long. I mean, the person, if you will, would have had to have had a severe genetic difference in order to be able to look like that. And not only with the super long arms, but to be able to run on all fours like that is just so different.
There's so much power. You can see the power when they ran.
And not only that, but the almost stretched out, elongated humanoid version of it was extremely lean and lanky and gaunt. And, I mean, it would even be hard for me to imagine a human, you or I, putting on, a monkey suit, if you will, to try to dress the part because, again, the arms were so super long and it was so tall, but it was also so incredibly thin. And you know what I mean? Like lean, long, lanky. But I mean, in order to be that tall and that long and stretched out, you would think that I would think that if it was a human, there would be more mass there. It would be wider. It would have a larger bone structure than what we thought. If that makes any sense.
Did you, when the thing turned sideways, did you guys get a sense for how wide the shoulders might have been?
I would say what I would exactly liken the frame to for anything that I've ever seen in real life would be an NBA player. Like it was more like I've been to a few Celtics games and I got the chance to see Shaquille O'Neal once, and I would say that it was like the proportions were more like that. So I wouldn't say vastly out of proportion with a human, other than way long arms and just way, larger. And that was really, and also covered in hair, which was a big factor.
Yeah.
Not very many basketball players running around covered in hair, is there?
And exactly, and running around in the middle of the night in Ellsworth across the road with an exact smaller replica. That was the part. That was the sticking point to the whole thing.
Now the second creature never was in a bipedal stance, just always was quadrupedally running?
It looked like it bolted across the road from the shoulder. Now
there's no guardrails there in that section, is there?
No.
No. I have to play devil's advocate for just a second because I know people are going to ask this, and like I said, Tyler, I've already spoken to you, and now that I know your wife's a marine biologist, it seems a little bit of a silly question, but do you think there's any chance at all that this could have been a pair of bears?
I'll let you answer that.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, it being in the fall time, a bear would be getting ready to hibernate. They would be packing on the pounds before they were going to go hibernate for the winter. Absolutely, absolutely not.
And yeah, and I second, and just the shape. No way a bear could even be that shape. It could not resemble that much human.
A bear would have had that more substantial frame. It would have been, it's thicker, so to speak, as far as its entire body build, and that's not what this had. This was much leaner and longer and more stretched out than that, and much thinner than a bear would have been.
Yeah. Or as far as width of shoulders, width of chest, everything.
Even the stomach, it's like, you know what I mean, like everything.
Yeah.
And plus, you wouldn't have probably confused a bear for a person because when they're walking, their legs are really, like you said, their proportions are kind of different.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. In the same token.
And we thought I'm sorry.
In the same token, I was going to say that there's no way that it would have been a person either.
Well, and I was going back to what we saw. The bear didn't cross my mind because of watching it again go down on the backs of its knuckles. What bear has ever done that? I'd like to meet that bear.
I don't. What was your reasoning for thinking it might have been a deer at the time?
Because as you're approaching it and you're watching for wildlife, so you can avoid it as you're driving a vehicle, the most common thing you see on the side of the road is a deer. Whether it's a doe or a buck or whatever, the most common thing you see on the side of the road is a deer. Right. So my brain was expecting to see a deer on the side of the road if I saw anything. And then to watch this whole scene unfold, I'm sorry, your brain is still trying to categorize everything. It's trying to make sense out of what it is you're seeing. And it's just not computing correctly is what it feels like. It feels like you're hallucinating almost, but you're not.
Right.
It's like you're in complete and utter disbelief of what it is you are seeing. And I think that's why Tyler and I both reacted after we watched this whole thing happen the way we did, which was I immediately wanted to call and tell the cops who were right down the street about what it was we just saw and maybe have them come check it out because it was just so weird. And Tyler's immediate reaction was, "Are you kidding me? What are you going to tell them?" Like,
right.
And not only what are you going to tell them, but how do you think they're going to react to you? And I was like, they can test me for anything. I don't do anything, so they're not going to find anything.
Oh, they would have strip searched your car, I'm sure, if you'd reported Bigfoot in Ellsworth. You guys would have been there a while.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I just felt like there was nothing that we could say that would make any sense at the time. I felt like we were kind of speechless at the time.
Completely.
I mean, we slowed down to a near stop when it occurred, and then pretty much rolled ahead forward. We didn't just speed off, but we were there long enough to be able to look to the right and see that there was nothing there. And I mean, where this occurred, there was a tiny stretch of wooded area on the left and a tiny stretch of wooded area on the right. So technically, I mean, they went from sort of a wooded area to not. But what I was going to say about you mentioning the deer again, the reason why it seemed like a deer is because the figure had that deer in the headlights kind of posture, except for it had what I noticed is an arm out just a bit in front of him, or he, she, whatever you want to call it. Arms like almost in hesitance, the way a deer would have its neck turned out into the road before it decides what it's going to do.
It was almost like it froze, like we caught it red-handed.
In a mid-stride, decided to keep on moving like it had decided it was going to cross the road, and then sort of took into consideration that it had a partner turn back to say, this is what we're doing, and then made that move. But that's why it seemed like a deer to me, because there was a moment of indecision, I think, at the edge of the road.
That's really interesting. So what you're saying kind of is that it behaved consistent with what you'd expect an animal to do if it was caught in there.
Absolutely. In my mind, it was a 100% animal sighting. The only thing is, in every nature except for what it was certainly nothing that I've seen as a traditional animal, and it was certainly did not act human-like and did not appear human-like. So
now both of you guys have kind of told me that this thing was lanky, and or at least the larger one, the adult one, was kind of lanky and thin. But I'm getting a sense from you that that's like the morphology, the shape of the overall body. What was your sense as to the health of the critter? Was it, I mean, we've talked about bears are usually pretty, fattened up in the fall, getting ready for wintertime. Do you think that this was, a healthy individual or a sickly one?
I think that if it was sickly, it would not have been able to move as quickly and as fluidly as what we had
as
seen.
it did, yeah. I agree. I think that it didn't seem sickly. If anything, I mean, we're not saying, or I'm not saying that it was spindly in any way. It just was very elongated in its look. Its movements were powerful, and it moved with not much, no problem. I mean, it looked to me like, if anything, it was a little lean or thin, or thinner than I've ever seen an animal with that mass.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, no, I didn't get I just wanted to clarify for people that would be watching this. I did kind of get the sense from you guys that it was thin, but yet, still powerful. Now, I've already asked Tyler this, but I'd like both you guys' answers. Did either one of you guys, consider getting out and going after these critters?
No.
No. I mean, it happened, I'd say, I don't know, I'd approximate the entire incident was maybe 7 seconds. Something 10
Wow.
seconds. I don't know. It was quick, but it was long enough. If you count 1,000, 2, 1,000. It's enough time to certainly get a visual on what it was, and it was also enough time for us to react to seeing what we were seeing enough to go, no way I'm getting out of this car. No way. So I think we initially did react with a little bit of fear. And once we knew it had passed and we continued to roll on forward, that's when the disbelief kind of hit. But I never even for 1 second even ran through my mind of getting out of the vehicle. I mean, even if I'd seen a deer or a bear, especially a bear, I wouldn't have got out of the vehicle either. But this was even stranger because we didn't know what we were seeing. I mean, we hadn't seen whatever it is that we were seeing before. I mean, I think we knew what we were seeing after the fact. I mean, it was pretty difficult.
And as you're going through that situation, at least I found for me, for the whole thing to be so mind-boggling, confusing, and trying to wrap your brain around what it is you're even seeing, because it's so far outside of the realm of your everyday, and what you've become accustomed to knowing is your local wildlife and what you might see out in the woods when you're driving, like trying to see if you have deer on the side of the road or if it's something else. And I think that when we were trying to figure out how we were reacting, each individually, the whole situation, and being so surprised about what was going on, Tyler made a comment to me that we were silent for a really long time afterward, because as he was driving, he goes, "We are never talking about this."
And here you guys are talking to me about it. I feel so lucky.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while, enough to where, I don't know.
All right, this might be kind of a little bit of a strange question. I don't know if you guys do much camping or not, but how would you feel, I refer to people like you as the knowers. I'm trying to find the truth. I don't know really what's out there, but when I talk to people like you, there's no question you guys know what you saw. So, you have this understanding that most people aren't privy to that. So how would you feel about, being in the wilds of Maine, camping in a tent now?
The way I feel about it is that I feel that it was a extremely rare thing that happened to us. I think that it was one of those right place or wrong place, whatever we want to look at it, right place, right time type of thing. I think that I'm not so worried about it simply because I just feel that it's a very rare occurrence. I think that is, we certainly don't follow this Bigfoot, or we don't really follow, shows and things that are on TV. But I just feel like that the population of whatever this thing is very small, and I feel like it was just a few and far between occurrence. So I'm not really scared to go out and camp, and I feel like that it's probably the nature of the creature, or whatever you want to call it, is to stay away from people. And don't ask me what brought him so close into our civilization, or whatever you want to call it, but it was obviously something. It had a mission that it was on, and
Well, let's talk about that for a second, Tyler. On the side of the road where those guys were headed, that takes them down to the shoreline, right?
It takes them down. This is another thing, is we did, after some time passed, we did look on some maps and stuff, just because we were trying to figure out in our brain, okay, we know this thing exists. What the heck was it doing here? And we had looked on some maps and on Google Earth and saw that there's a waterway, essentially, that goes from quite a bit up north into some fairly thick wooded areas, and it sort of culminates or comes down to Ellsworth. And if it were, if there was swift water that time of year, I don't think it would have been a very good idea to cross it. Union River is what the place is called the Union River, and it dumps into an area called Leonard Lake, I think, and then maybe continues out down to the ocean. So it does lead down to the coast, but yeah, this is like a riverway.
So that's interesting. There's somewhat of a natural game corridor, that choke point where the creature crossed the road, you're saying.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to say it. It's, they could have continued down even further to the coast, but if they were trying to stay in any kind of real wooded area, yeah, it would basically lead you right down to that bottleneck.
Now, I know you guys, this was slightly backlit. I don't know how much your headlights managed to get on these things, but did either one of you guys have a feel for, how much fur or how much hair was on these things, whether it was the same length overall? Was it longer on the arms? Did you see any hair color? What about the hair?
I would say that it was essentially uniform and length all over the body. I didn't notice any longer hair in any particular area. It looked pretty uniform. And my daughter has a board book that has different animals in it. That's mom and baby. And there's this one picture, oddly enough, of an orangutan that has a baby orangutan clung to it, and it's showing how the mom carries around the baby hanging onto its fur. And I showed it to Tyler the other day because the color of the fur on the orangutan and the length and kind of the waviness and that kind of thing, and how it's standing straight out, the way that looks in my memory is so similar to what we saw that night that I had to show it to him.
I agree with her as far as uniform hair on the body. I noticed the arm sticking out before it had crossed the road initially, and you could see wisps of hair. So if it were longer in any part, it would have been sort of wisped together. And basically, we didn't get much sense of color of the first, but on the second we were approaching, and the headlights definitely hit, I would say, the hind end of the larger one and the passing of the smaller one. And yeah, I would say me personally, a little more brown than an orangutan, but when she showed it to me, I kind of smirked, and I was like, well, that's pretty close.
I do
thicker,
think,
maybe a little bit, but
yeah, I do think it would have also been hard to tell a color per se, because the street light that they were backlit from also had that orange hue to it.
Yeah, and our headlights too. I think if you shine a headlight directly on fur, I think that it kind of cuts through it a bit, so you don't get a true sense of the color. I think that's kind of dependent on the angle that we're at, and it probably may have looked a little bit lighter with the situation that we were. I don't know. It's hard to say.
I wouldn't feel comfortable saying what color it was or anything.
Okay, so you're kind of leaning a little bit more towards a brownish orangutan color as opposed to a black bear coloration. Is that pretty accurate?
It didn't strike me as jet black. No.
Now, did either one of you guys manage to get a chance to see the face of the creature, or was it silhouetted to the point that you really couldn't get the details?
It was definitely silhouetted. When it was turned towards us, because it did turn towards us, but only to look behind itself, we were too far away at that point. It was a very clear silhouette, but simply our headlights hadn't hit it yet. There was light from behind, so the silhouette was perfect, but our lights just hadn't hit it yet. It was only when the smaller one ran across that our lights were kind of pressing on it.
Did you get a chance to see the side of, like, could you see the ear on the little one?
Yes, but this thing was moving very fast. I mean, it was moving faster than a deer, I would say.
Wow. When it went across, the little one when it went across the road?
Yeah. Low slung and fast. I mean, it was very quick. But not quick enough that we couldn't see. But it was too quick to really say. It was more, too quick to say that there's an ear. But yeah, I mean, you could see that it had all those, you could see the anatomy, you just couldn't see exact.
Now, when the larger one went down and started doing what you described as this knuckle running, did you get a sense of the muscles and the shoulders of the arm? What did they? Could you see them at all, or was it too much of a silhouette again?
Again, it was more backlit. It was, like as far as you couldn't see any detail. As far as I think what you're looking for is, could you see any ripples from the musculature and that kind of thing? No.
No, but you could definitely see very well the motion. The motion of everything extremely well. It's just you couldn't see intricate.
So the fluid nature of this thing really struck with you guys, I take it.
Yeah, that's the first thing that really made my senses jump was the way that thing took off. That's what really made me go, what's going on? And it was a weird motion in the sense of that's where I got the sense of, is this a joke? What's this fool doing? Is what I kind of thought in my mind. What's going on here? And, what ensued obviously quickly showed me that it wasn't somebody who was joking around at all.
All right, I really only have, I had a question, then I forgot what the hell I was going to ask you guys. I had one more question I was going to ask. Oh, I can't think of it now.
Oh, I do have one other detail that I do want to mention.
Oh, please. Maybe I'll remember my question while you're saying it.
There we go. I think that it's interesting, and maybe again, I struggle with creature, animal. I don't know. But even as it turned around and our headlights were approaching it, I think it's interesting that there was couldn't pick out any of those facial features. You couldn't see like any reflection or glint from the eye, so to speak. You know what I mean? I find that interesting because when there's a deer or a fox or a coyote or anything that goes to run across the street, almost every time your headlights will pick out something, and you'll get that glint back from the eye. And there was nothing like that, which kind of resonated with me and made me. I thought about that.
I am so glad that you brought up that detail because I wasn't going to think to ask you that, but a lot of people, debate whether these things have an eye shine or not, because if I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, but if you have the tapetum lucidum, it's a reflective layer in the back of your eyes, and there's only a couple primates that have that. So you wouldn't probably expect Sasquatch to have it. So I find that interesting that you're reporting no eye shine.
Yeah,
that's a very interesting
not
detail.
Seeing either. And the only other thing I was going to add too is that I know that we didn't see detail, but what we saw was definitive enough so that, say, you had a coyote crossing the road, and then you saw a dog crossing the road. It was definitive enough so that I could have said, that's a coyote, and that's a dog. Or that's a fox, and that's something of similar size, a raccoon.
Right.
It was definitive enough for us to say, that's not a bear, that's not a deer.
It's not a human.
Not a human.
What is that?
Yeah. What is that? I I mean, it was definitely that definitive, and I really want to get that point across, that it's not just like, oh, that could have been such and such. No chance.
Well, you bring up a good point too, because when you see something like I've seen bears, cross the road really fast, and you're right. Sometimes you're startled, but the second something follows behind, you're a little more centered for the second one.
Absolutely.
And I never got the feeling that there was any aggressiveness going on there. The entire thing, the feeling of, I got caught with my hand in the cookie jar. What am I gonna do? It was more that, and then you could definitely see the bond between the first one and the second one.
Yeah, that's interesting. That communication that you guys saw taking place there.
Yeah.
Now,
I'm still blown away by the fact of the nipples.
yeah, that would freak me out too, I think. Now, obviously, you guys are knowers now. What would you say, how did you feel about the whole phenomenon of Sasquatch before you had your encounter?
I thought it was completely probably a mythical
Didn't
whatever.
exist. Total, just a bunch of people playing a bunch of hoaxes.
Right. Absolutely. And I would regard myself as a person who's very skeptical. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it type of thing, and this is just one incident where I definitely saw it, and my mind has certainly changed. I don't really expect it to impact me in any way, because I just think it was a rare occurrence, but...
I will say that once I can remember at some point seeing something on TV a long time ago or something. It's like a little video clip of a supposed sighting of Sasquatch or Bigfoot in the woods, and it's walking and it's flipping its hands back and forth or something, and they were kind of talking about the video of it and whether it was a hoax or not, and what we saw was not that. It was different than that.
Absolutely.
And I mean, maybe there's a bunch of these things all over the world, just like, humans, and that there are different types in different locations. Maybe. I mean, I wouldn't count anything out now.
Right.
But that was not what we saw.
No, much more of an animalistic sighting, not just walking down the street type of thing. It was much more, like any other wild animal sighting you'd expect to see, and that's why it was strangely familiar, but strangely completely alien. And I don't mean like from another area. I mean it's strange.
Right. Well, I did tell you that was my last question, but now you've generated another question. If you care to answer one more.
Sure.
You guys, have you seen the Patterson footage, the famous Patterson footage?
Not by name. I mean, I don't know. I've seen some things on TV in the past, but
I want to say that video that I just mentioned is the only thing I think I've seen. I don't know if that was by Patterson or somebody else.
I'll have to send you guys some links to go look, because people are going to want to, the holy grail is the Patterson footage. A lot of people think it's a person in a suit. I don't know, but it's nice to compare that. People can say, well, my sighting either looks similar or it doesn't. But
right. Well, I will say if it's a sighting where it's not moving at any particular rate of speed, it would be hard for us probably to judge, because we basically saw still a small amount of slow walk and basically the bounding. So it definitely was, unless it was moving in a sort of agitated way, I don't know, it'd be hard for us to say, but I'd look at it for sure.
Well, Tyler and Natasha, I can't thank you guys enough for coming forth and taking the time to talk with me and share your experience. And I will be in touch with you guys. Okay, hold on. I'm going to stop the recording right now. Kathy wanted me to ask you guys what you think. Now we're back. Now we're back being recorded again. I think we're recording. Yeah, we are. Do you guys have an idea, an estimate for the weight of the adult? Just a rough guess.
I would have to say, due to its height, it would have had to have weighed at least as much as I do. I'm probably 275 pounds, so I would put it probably between that and
I'd say more. I don't know.
300 and something. It's hard to say. I mean, it was so much taller than I am. I'm 6 feet, and
super muscular.
Yeah, so I would say in the high. I guess I'd say high 300s. I don't know.
And what do you think, Natasha? Do you agree with Tyler?
me, men and women have mystified me my entire life. Because I've seen two people of the opposite sex that look the same to me, weigh completely different, so I am such a bad judge as far as weight. I wouldn't even dare to conjecture.
But Tyler, you're
I
pretty
based on the height and given myself, I would say, you know, it would have had to have been over 300 pounds.
Wow.
At the skinniest, it could have been my size, 275, but I highly doubt that because even the smaller one looked to be about, say, what would you say, like a 10-year-old
Or smaller.
A 10-year-old boy size, but much younger looking, kind of. I don't know, or like immature looking.
What do you think the smaller one weighed?
I don't know. It was about 30% the height of the taller one.
I guess, yeah, that's probably good to say it about 30%. I don't know. So
it was like 2.5 feet tall?
No,
it'd be more than that.
No, it was at least, no, I wouldn't say 2.5 feet tall.
Right, it was taller.
Yeah. 4 feet tall, maybe. 4.5, 5 tall.
I think it was 5.
Yeah, I don't think.
And that was knuckle running. It was about, you're thinking it was about 5 foot tall, huh?
In the run, I'm just looking at the length of its body as it was moving, stretched out. And I would say, I mean, up off the ground, it was in the 4s, probably 4 feet, probably.
I think 4 at the height, at the most.
Up off the ground. But if you look at it the way, because I mean, you got a chance to see it extending itself, and so then I would put it to 4.5, 5 feet, probably. I guess. I mean, it was very hard to judge real quick. And yet, the female could have been taller than we said. I would say that at absolute minimum shortest, it would have been 6'8", tiny.
Wow.
At its top height, I would say definitely over 7'2". I mean, like I said, I got to see Kilo once, and he's a big boy, and it was definitely that kind of stature for sure.
Boy, 7 foot, that's tall.